All right.
Got it.
So this is for discussion 2. Again, Darling Greathouse and Richard DeShields. And Nathan has indicated that he's not able to attend this meeting today.
Anyway, the name of the study that I have is called First in College, a qualitative exploration of experiences of first generation students by Rebecca Evans, Stansberry, Bullington, and Burnett. And it's a 2020 study. And it is actually a comparison, which makes me think it's an ontological study because of it's different perspectives, but it's a comparison of first-gen students at a community college and a university. And so with comparing those two, and let me see, I forgot the names of the schools. The community college is rural and the university is a metropolitan research. And so it's reviewing the information that they, in regards to their experiences and the impact on their returning to school in the following semester, and just their overall perceptions of their own personal success. So it's addressing retention and success. Okay, now I forgot what else we're supposed to talk about.
So is the outcome of the study more about like just a narrative of their experience, or is there like a cause and effect, or is there something that they are hoping to change in the final outcome of that study?
So what this study does is it actually reviews the self-reported. Sorry, I just lost my study.
That's all right.
I have a cat who is assisting me at the moment. And the self-reported backgrounds, as well as, and general demographic information, as well as their actual experiences within the first year of their attendance at either the community college or the university. They looked at non-cognitive experiences as well as their own, by self-report, their own self-efficacy and how committed they were to their educational goals. What happened with it is that community college students in this rural situation perceived that the support services that they had available to them were the reason that they were successful in their first and second semesters. The ones that they used the most were advising, financial aid, career services, peer tutoring. And they found it helpful to get information about the resources. It was easy to get that information and it was fast. The university students struggled more about in regards to being able to access services. They didn't know where to go to get that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
So
it sounds like they're using a narrative approach, or maybe a kind of the ethnographic. If you're saying the group is this, so maybe that's ethnographic and maybe it's narrative. Could you tell from was there anything that gave you like either a definition or stated those things?
So when I looked in our book, on page 20, if you want to follow along with me, and I looked at that chart. If I look at ontological, it just says reports different perspectives as themes develop in the findings. And that's why I was thinking this was an ontological survey. And what was the other one that you said it might be?
So I kind of actually thought a little bit about the approach. So I was thinking the narrative or the ethnographic. And the reason I wondered is that narrative is, again, just descriptions and examples by certain themes. So the way you broke it out and said like advising and something that maybe those could be some common themes. Or again, I thought ethnography because that is about the connections between processes, knowledge, and human life. And it's a study of groups and the understanding of that culture. So if it's of this student population, that maybe that's the group, and I couldn't specifically tell, but maybe.
Well, the group is first gen,
Yep.
meaning that none of them have family experience in regards to it. But I guess I'm struggling a little bit because of, so is ontological just philosophical?
Yeah, so the ontology, epistemology, axiology, methodological are the philosophical assumptions. The frameworks are like the post-positivism, social constructivism, transformative framework, postmodern, pragmatism, feminist, critical race, queer, disability, etc.
All right. Well, I guess I'm was looking at it incorrectly. So.
Well, I think you did. You clearly gave the philosophical assumption, the views of reality, the different perspectives. And so, and that's I think one of the things about this assignment, right, is to say, well, when we're reading a study, it's not going to say it may not say those exact same things. So how did you deduce that? And you gave, I think, good justifications for that philosophical assumption.
Yeah. Okay, but let's go back to the question. Let's see.
The framework.
Okay. All right. So let me.
So I can ask you a few questions that might help you. Were there a lot of theories that were identified in the research? Yeah. So that might not be post.
I mean, there was a little bit of research done, but not a lot. So
my mind said maybe social constructivism, where you're seeking the understanding of the world around the researcher. So they're studying the application and impacts on first generation students. So maybe that's kind of understanding that environment, maybe.
Okay, so there's four researchers, 3 from 3 different universities and 1 from a community college. So with that many authors, I'm not sure it's understanding the author's framework.
Well, but in my mind, and when I read that, I think you might, and again, remember, I'll be very candid with you. This is the first time I've used any of these terms. So I don't know that I'm completely understanding them either. But my mind says that it's just around the researchers and their environment. So for example, if it's a group of scientists, their environment might be a laboratory experience. For educators, their research and their world is this impact with students. So potentially, that's where my mind says maybe the social constructivism. You could kind of narrow down, like for example, the next question would be, was there a specific improvement that they were trying to make? And when you looked at like the conclusion, or did you see anything that was about actions, about change, making change, or was it really a reflection of like an interview with these students and then kind of coding those outcomes?
So they did do coding. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. They're basically, though, what they found was that their research was confirmed by past research. So they were replicating previous types of research, and they had they came to the same conclusions that past research had come to. So, and some of it has to do with like community colleges. Students felt better about their size of their school as compared to university students. Community college students better able to access resources compared to university students. And social integration was important for both of them. But what was most important was their own personal determination and self-motivation. But all this is self-reported
Yeah.
work. So
And again,
it's,
those stories are important, right? And that's one of the things about qualitative that I think is important. I think if I hear anything, and again, since I haven't read the study, my mind says that it could be that social constructivism, where again, they're just trying to understand that idea of first generation college students, what's happening, right? And their stories. Or my mind says that it could potentially be pragmatic, or the pragmatism, where they're looking at what are the outcomes of the research. And because when you say something about it's like a replication, and that the data and the outcomes looked a lot like previous research, that maybe that's the focus on those outcomes and how it fits within the other research. So it could maybe be the pragmatism framework in my mind.
I think I'm leaning towards the pragmatism is is pragmatism part of postmodern perspectives, or is it separate?
I think it's separate. I think because I think they gave like 8. They gave post-positivism, social constructivism, transformative approach, postmodern perspectives, pragmatism, and then it went into what I would call several other theoretical approaches, like the feminist critical theory, critical race theory, queer theory, and disability theory. And when I talk about mine, like they're using the word framework, and I've kind of encapsulated it into one of the frameworks. But I think I've also kind of made up one that I think could fit in, but I don't know.
Okay.
You're going to laugh at me whenever I'm like, well.
I like it.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. So I think after our conversation, I like the pragmatic approach the best of a framework used. And let's see. If I look at in more detail at some of these parts, pragmatists agree that research always occurs in social, historical, political, and other contexts. And I think that's important. They look to the what and how of research based on its intended consequences. Truth is what works at the time. It's not committed to any one system of philosophy or reality. So that part I've not quite got my head wrapped around, but anyway.
And the only reason that my mind initially thought social constructivism, again, based on what you shared, was the way that I've kind of read what I thought pragmatism was, where pragmatism, from the language in our reading, talked a little bit about taking actions or consequences of research. Yeah. And, you know, since that could be, that's why my mind said it could be, but I didn't hear a lot of that. That's why I thought maybe it was just an understanding of what's happening in our first generation worlds. So that's why my mind first went to that social constructivism, where we take this group, which is first generation students, and we understand their stories, and we can tell that their stories, code it. But again, remember, I don't know either. I'm still trying to dig into these. And so hopefully, Dr. B, as you're watching this, you can kind of maybe give us a little bit more.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, that study's a good one, right? Because we deal with that in our world. And I was happy to hear you talk about the different approach of the theorists or the researchers, because as I was kind of learning all this new language that I'd not had before, my mind said, well, was there any biases? So if all of those authors had been only at a 4-year and they're talking about 2-year, or if they had only been about 2-year, how could they? So I was wondering what if there was some of that axiology, some assumptions based on their impact. So depending on the researcher, there could be some of those things. So my mind was trying to take all these things that we learned and try to weave all that in.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to mention is that this was published in the Journal of the Virginia Community Colleges. So it was published even though university people participated, it was published in a community college journal. So,
Okay,
anyway,
very interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Well,
all right.
I'm gonna
Tell me
share-
about yours.
certainly. I'm
My
gonna
husband's over here making comments. So if you hear background based on what we've been talking about. So if you hear background stuff, it's him. Okay.
he can give us a grade later.
Oh. Did you hear that, Larry?
What?
You can give us a grade later. He's
Well,
laughing.
No, no.
Say no. Okay.
Let me say. I'll be
Here, come around here and meet Rich real quick. No, come on, quick.
don't let the screen hurt his eyes.
Watergate. At this point in time, I have no knowledge of that, and if I did, I would not be at liberty to divulge anything that I have heard.
Hurry, if you want to meet Rich, hurry.
Try to be fun.
Well, he's laughing.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'm laughing.
Hey,
How are you?
good. Where are you
Good.
at? This
I'm in
is
Montana.
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 Yes.
This is
I know.
Larry. This is Rich.
Yeah,
Rich,
Larry.
it's just
Okay.
weird, you know. This is like Star Trek or something.
Well, Joe told
uh,
me that you either have a cultural background with some maybe indigenous or Native American or First
Yes.
Nation people. So you need to come up to Montana.
yeah, it's the Lakota up there, right? Well,
We actually have several, right? We have
Mhm.
we have the Little Boys, we have the I'm sorry, the Proud Boys, we have Fort Peck, we have several different groups that are near.
oh, okay. I was meaning the
the
nation.
tribal-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, but what's the nation's names?
Yeah, the Crow, we have the
You identified
Crow.
4 of them.
Okay, the Crow. Yes.
The Lakota is actually very near. It comes into eastern Montana and North Dakota and in some of
Okay.
those areas too. So again, we're kind of surrounded by the different tribal groups.
So you can stand up.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was just gonna say, oh, there I am. Is this my good side? Oh, no, the Crow, let me say, the Abaroska. I don't
Yep.
know if I'm saying, did I say it close even?
I've heard that. I've heard the Abasorki, but again, I don't know 100% either.
Okay, well, Abasorski, that sounds better.
Okay, what about it?
Anyway, yeah, I think they're pretty neat, and I've read some I can't think of the things right off the top of my head, but I've read a few books on them and everything.
Yeah.
You ever hear of Utley, historian? Oh, well,
Yeah, it's not coming
Okay.
to me.
well, that's enough. Y'all got to get back to work here. I'd like to just go up there to see everything and, the
Well,
big
Rich
stuff.
said we could stay with him.
Oh,
That's right. That's right.
appreciate it.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
so in my study, because I don't know what my dissertation is, and because this was the first time that I was introduced to some of these terms, I really just kind of went out and I started looking at different studies, and I wanted to find some that I felt clearly identified, and then some things that I could maybe identify on my own. So that's where I ended up finding this. So I'm going to share my screen just real quickly to kind of tell you about the study, and then I'll take this off and talk a little bit more about it. But the study that I reviewed was a study called Extending the Framework of Generativity and Theory Through Research, and it's a qualitative study. And so this study really is, they're looking at new ways of thinking about generativity. And so that word means the way that older individuals help contribute to the development of others in the younger generations, and also how it helps
It's
move
a
society forward.
psychology term, just so you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, because Erickson, we talk a little bit about the different, kind of like we learned about Chickering. Erickson educationally also has one of the stages is generativity versus stagnation, right? So there
Right.
is a theory associated. And so they did talk about a few theories in this study. So you'll see like Erickson, Cotre, and others. So anyway, it looked at kind of the social construction of a group of 200 women from 58 to 98, and they varied in their different kind of statuses, being married, having children, biological, not. They did interviews, and really the outcome was to identify the things that each of these women identified where they felt that they were contributing basically to their history, their own self-fulfillment, etc. So in these interviews, they coded all of this language. And so based on their life history, their involvement in clubs, things that they identified as significant outcomes in their life. And in this, they put it into historical, family, individual, and relational. And really, of the 200 people studied, only 5 did not meet some of the terms in this research, so of generativity. So based on that alone, and I'm going to stop sharing, I kind of started to think a little bit about, well, the approaches, the philosophical assumptions, and et cetera. So as I looked at this, the research itself specifically used the word ethnography throughout. I mean, it said this was an ethnographical study. And so again, fortunately, it said those words, but I also wanted to look at it to make sure I understood a little bit more. And so the way my mind did, and there were exact quotes like, and I quote, most informants were interviewed in an open-ended ethnographic format, right? So I was lucky. It said specifically those words, but I wanted to look and see, well, how else could I have learned from that? And so, I did look at who the authors were. So there was a researcher in sociology, a researcher in anthropology. And when you looked at kind of that idea of ethnography, that's one of the major types of qualitative research done in that with that group. So my mind said, well, that's one way I might have seen that. They are specifically referencing a study of a specific group of people. And so when I looked at ethnography, it's the connection between processes, knowledge, and human life, the study of groups, or the understanding of culture. So again, the group is this 200 women, but and maybe people that are in this non-traditional age. So my mind said that. And then lastly, and again, I don't know whether or not a study might have different approaches. And so my mind asked the question about if there was also maybe a narrative approach. And the reason I said that is that they do use a lot of detailed descriptions and the breakdown about life history, thoughts, experiences. So to me, it's there is a thing about life history. And in that narrative approach, it talks about detailed description and examples by theme, structure, visual. And in the study, they do ask in the interview questions, they ask for people, do you have products that you've produced that you're most proud of that will live after you die, basically, right? So there is this idea of something that's visual that they can produce, although again, I think the approach primarily is the ethnography, but I don't know if in, again, a study, there might be multiple approaches. So I'm gonna lean towards ethnography, but I can hear a little bit of both. So that's kind of where I came with the approach. I did think that the philosophical assumptions might have been more about the epistemology approach, as that they focused on the connections and they used this generativity theory. They did interview specifically participants. Throughout, you're going to hear sentences that say things about connections between people and their human life. So again, my mind leaned towards a little bit of that epistemological approach. But I did think that one of the statements where maybe there was some impact of that axiology assumptions, there was some language that said that one of the researchers specifically worked with this population, and that that there might have been some personal values that might have been through their research. But again, I didn't think that there was anything that I saw that might throw that as a major impact. And then finally, the frameworks. They do use the word framework in this document, and they actually call it the generativity framework. So my mind was wondering if that is actually a framework or if that's just the kind of the language that they're using. So what I wanted to do was to look at what our reading said this week. And, I read about generational experiences, feelings, actions, life story, all of those things. And so based on all of that, I did sense a little bit of that social constructivism. I thought that the
Okay.
authors were trying to understand the world around them. So by relaying how older people learn and things that they have found significant to help give their life meaning towards the ends of their life, with the idea that if we know these things, that those would be things that younger generations might try to apply to make sure that they don't stop in their development early on. But the actual study itself doesn't have a cause and effect. There was no specific outcome. So that's kind of why I leaned more towards that social constructivism. But when I first read it, and because I read it a few times, I thought that maybe it was transformative, that they wanted to say, okay, here's some information from this older population, and here's what younger people need to do to be more
Yeah, that's
self-actualized.
what I was thinking of.
But the actual study itself, that's not the outcome. The outcome really is having these individuals share their stories. They do these interview questions. They do break them up into different themes. And then they code it to say, of these 200 people, like how many say this and what are the common frames to see whether or not they fit within the generativity literature, right? So that's why I kind of leaned into that social construct of this group of population. And then the last thing, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, look at on page 25, look at the second paragraph. Under transformative framework, where it says, qualitative research should contain an action agenda for reform that may change the life of the participants, the institutions in which they live and work, or even the researchers' lives.
But there was no change that the actual outcome or the future things to consider. There was nothing about action. So that's why my mind moved that it might not be transformative.
Okay, well, what was the third thing then?
And then Dr. B, she used this word that I, again, am not that familiar with, other than like, for example, I've used in my teaching, because I teach human development, I've talked about like androgyny. And so I get that really when she said the word andragogy and the study, the learning, right? So that idea that andragogy, again, is a little bit about kind of that studying the way that we learn, right? That in our later years or as we're older. So my mind then said, well, could this be a way of learning of a certain like class of people? So my mind in our reading saw again the feminist theory, critical race theory, queer theory, disability theory. My mind said, well, they're using this generativity theory, or my mind made up a word. It's not really made up, but maybe there's a gerontological theory. Maybe there is just like this queer theory or race theory, that there might be something specifically about this generativity. So short of—
Yes, well, I can tell you there is, just from my background in the field of psychology. So,
yeah.
because there are theories related to gerontology.
Right. So, but the textbook doesn't give us any of those frameworks. They kind of limit it to this. So if I were to choose one of these, I might lean towards that social constructivism, although I do, again, if there is another way to use framework, in this literature, they are saying the framework is generativity. So again, that's kind of something that as we continue to learn more, my mind was starting to kind of think about all those things. So that's really, and ultimately at the end of the study, they didn't call for action. There wasn't that this is the major change. There was no problem or a solution or a focus to an outcome. It literally was saying, in this group of persons, what is their story? How do they identify their own self-worth, and how do they get there? What's their social group? All those things. So that's why I leaned more towards that social constructivist.
Okay, as we've talked, I support your choice of social constructivism. I think I'm gonna have to do like our 5 elements of effective thinking says, and learn deeply. Is that it? Study
Yeah.
deeply, learn deeply.
Well, I typed up one page, darling. I just typed up a page and it has like approaches and it lists 5 things with very quick synopsis because the textbook does a lot of, we talked about wordiness. They typically use a lot of the words to define the other words. And so I tried to break it down into just a small sheet for me so that as we're going through the class or as I'm looking at these different studies that I can quickly say, what kind of things do I see to see if that helps me. So I'll send it to you. I don't know if it's very good, but I know it's the way that I learn, so I can share it with you.
Well, that would be fine if you've already written it up as well.
I saved it.
I'm happy to build upon your work. It's the excuse me, it is going to take a little time to understand the various frameworks, but I guess as we look through the research that we're doing, either in this class or any other class or on our dissertations, it's probably going to be helpful to try to identify them as a means of practicing. And then I don't know though how to determine if we're correct or not. But anyway, so
I'm hoping that Dr. B gives like some, like in our discussions, maybe some response, but because again, I don't know if a study will have multiple approaches or multiple frameworks. Because like we asked the question about mixed methods, and that's not this. That's qualitative and quantitative, but I'm wondering if there is.
There's a chapter further on that talks about mixed methods, I believe, or one of those articles, because I remember seeing it. But
yeah, well, I just want to learn more about the frameworks. If you can use multiple frameworks, if there potentially would be multiple approaches in a study, that might make it more complicated of a study. So again, we want to keep it simple. We want to make sure that we're being informed. This study did a real good job of using the literature and those things. So that was kind of the way I approached that.
yeah.
So
Well, good stuff. I do want to participate in Nathan's because I need to practice. So
all right,
for sure.
Well, if he sends me a message, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All righty. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.